Well, listen, I'm delighted to be here, and it's great to see a bunch of old friends and hopefully some new ones. I want to talk to you today about national energy policy. It's a very kind of timely issue and one that impacts all of us as individuals, our families, our communities, and the businesses that we work with. You know, I woke up this morning and was looking at the Dow futures, and it showed that they were going to be down 100 again today. And I'm just struck with how timely and how important this issue is to America right now, as we're struggling to come out of a challenged economy with perhaps worrying about a double-dip recession, when we're faced with unacceptably high unemployment. The effect that a sensible national energy policy can have on helping us lead the way out of this, I think, is just crucial. And that's why Southern Company, being such a conservative company, has taken a much higher profile here recently with the issues we have on the table. Because what's fascinating right now is, in fact, our national energy policy is really this kind of patchwork quilt of one-off laws, overreaching regulation. And in fact, it is arguable right now that national energy policy is not being created and implemented by Congress, who is accountable to the electorate. In fact, it is arguable that the regulators of the United States, who are accountable to no electorate, are putting in place national energy policy. And I'm afraid that if we don't get control of the situation, then in fact what we could see is a circumstance where we see even greater rising energy prices, a lack of reliability, further burdening our economy and destroying our ability to create and sustain job growth. So these are serious issues, but I am very hopeful. We're working really hard to get sensible approaches here, and Southern Company, I think, is leading the way in many respects on putting in place something that I think could come to fruition and does have, I think, a constructive solution. There's really two segments to that. Oh, before I do, I must say, when I'm talking about national energy policy here this morning, I'm really talking about the electricity side of it. I won't comment on foreign oil, except to say that we should use less of it. But in terms of electricity, there's really two approaches that we think are important to talk about. The first is what we call all the arrows in the quiver. The United States is blessed with a wide array of energy resources. There's no one solution that will create all of the advantages that we need to sustain this economy going forward. We need them all. I know you all are shareholders. I hope you're doing okay in these markets. My oldest son is still in college. He's a terrific investor, and he's done very well with Apple. But even him, he owns a variety of resources in his stock portfolio. That's the approach we need to take with our national energy approach. You know, when everybody talks about they want certainty, even though you may have certainty today, you know that all these exogenous factors change around us all the time. Certainty is a bit of an illusion. And so you've got to be able to have options in your approach to drive this economy forward. So that's critical, all the arrows in the quiver. The second segment that I'll talk about is the need for the United States to really reinvest in proprietary, robust research and development. The very first time I met with Secretary Chu of the Department of Energy, and I must say I've met some DOE guys here, Southern Company goes back a long way with the DOE. They are a terrific regulator, so I don't mean to paint all regulators with one brush, but we have a terrific relationship with that organization. And one of the things I love to say about our whole approach on research and development and our approach with DOE has been, we are not involved in rhetoric, we are involved in developing solutions. And I think Secretary Chu has been a great guy to lead that organization. The very first time I met with him, he remarked almost immediately that he had just met with some people from China and was lamenting the fact that the Chinese were outstripping the United States on technological innovation in the energy sector. Well, for Southern Company, that's simply not true. Southern Company remains the only company in the United States, in our industry, that remains deeply engaged in proprietary research and development. And so what we've got to do is to continue to drive that kind of strategy to develop the solutions for the future. The American economy, the American energy industry should take a backseat to no one in that respect. I'll talk more about that later. Let's first deal with this notion of all the arrows in the quiver. When I talk about that, I really call out kind of 5 segments, 5 different areas in which we need to develop future capability. The first is nuclear. The second is what I call 21st century coal. The third is natural gas. The fourth is renewables. And the fifth is energy efficiency. Southern Company is the only company in the United States today that is committed to growing every one of those segments. We have committed over $20 billion to growing those energy resources. And in the process, according to the University of West Georgia, we are contributing to the United States economy over 250,000 jobs, direct and indirect. Now, the first one of those is nuclear. The United States has a terrific track record in running excellent nuclear operations. We get up in the morning every day, we go to bed every night, thinking about how to create a stable energy supply in the safest manner possible. And we are committed to that, and we are accountable for that. And we will continue to be so in the years ahead. But when you think about new nuclear today, you must first address, I think, the events in Japan around Fukushima and all the tragedy that went on there. Look, our thoughts and our prayers and our offers to help go out to those folks. But we should not let that dissuade us from the momentum we're building right now. In fact, I'm very proud of this industry. The nuclear industry always has an approach about continuous improvement and about sharing institutional learnings. And so what we've done is we've taken a very thoughtful, thorough review of the events that led up to Fukushima and then all the consequential events after the unfortunate tsunami and everything else. And the NRC just recently published a 90-day report where they tried to bring back an initial take on those learnings and apply them to the current nuclear industry. And I think they mostly do apply to the current nuclear fleet. In fact, you'd be glad to know that for all the findings that they reached from Japan, there were no material issues with the Southern Company nuclear fleet. So that's important. When I think about Southern Company leading the renaissance in America to build new nuclear, it is important to note that we have 3 unique differences from what happened in Japan. First is that we are not in a seismic sensitive area. The second is we are not on a coastline. Plant Vogtle 3 and 4 is some 130 miles inland, some 220 feet above sea level. And in terms of technology, the Fukushima plant was a little bit of an older version of nuclear technology. The technology that we're building at our Vogtle site is the newest, safest nuclear technology on the planet today. It is the Westinghouse AP1000, and in fact, it does not even require an external power source to get water where it needs to be during an emergency. We are very excited on our progress. It's a 10-year project, $14 billion. We own about 45.7% of that. And we're at a very crucial point right now. We've already invested about $3.5 billion on the site right now. But we're right on the edge of getting a COL, a Combined Construction and Operating License, approved by the NRC. Now, this is a very rigorous, arguably one of the most intense reviews of any industrial process by a governmental agency. But here again, I would applaud the work of the NRC. I think they're doing a great job. And for all the reasons you may want to throw stones at Washington, even through the travails we've had with Fukushima and everything else, the Obama administration, Congress, the NRC, our own governor in the state of Georgia, the legislature there, the regulators there, and in fact the public have been exceedingly supportive of this national imperative to get nuclear going in America again today. So we look forward to getting the COL hopefully by the end of this year, and we'll continue to move forward in a constructive way. Remember, nuclear generation is emissionless. It is a dominant solution. It currently represents 20% of the United States energy supply. That segment of our energy portfolio must grow for the future, and we're proud to lead the way. The second segment that I want to talk about is 21st century coal. Well, let's think about that for a minute. I got to kind of set the table here. See, the United States can be thought of as the Saudi Arabia of coal. We currently hold about 28% of the world's coal reserves, and our coal reserves are of a very high grade. They have tremendous value and have been largely responsible for something like 50% of the energy production in America today. It is the bedrock, the foundation of industrial growth. It has been stable, safe, and low cost. It has really helped drive this economy. We've got to find a way to keep this in our portfolio going forward. Now, there are a series of regulations being put forth today by the EPA. There's a series of them that, taken together, will shut down a significant segment of the coal-generating fleet in the United States. As a consequence, we will raise prices depending on where you live. If this goes unchecked, some 10 to 25%. We will reduce reliability, and we will reduce job growth. Now, we're working constructively with EPA as we have in the past, and my sense is, and I'm hopeful in this, is that this just won't happen. Currently, there are deadlines in place that are unrealistic. There are standards in place that don't make sense. And when you think about the cumulative effect of what's going on right now to reduce the importance of coal in America, I want to leave you with a question. And I want you to walk out of here with this question. Why now? Even if what you believe the EPA is doing is right, why now, on the backs of a struggling economy, where we're worried about a double-dip recession, do we want to increase energy prices 10 to 25%? Why now, with unacceptably high unemployment? Do we want to take, an estimate is, about 1 million jobs out of the economy? Doesn't make sense to me. And why do we want to do it in a time frame that could impair reliability in the United States? See, we don't need a regulatory stick in order to transition the fleet. The fleet is already transitioning, and we're committed to doing that. Southern Company alone, 4 years ago, we produced 70% of our energy from coal. In the first quarter of 2011, that number had dropped to 51%, and by the end of this decade, we'll be in the very low 40s. And where all that is going is to natural gas, most likely. So we're all committed to that. But we don't need to put, certainly not now, on this economy, a regulatory burden that will further hurt our ability to grow the economy and create jobs. One of the ways that we're going to take this country forward, I hope, on our policy around coal, I'll talk about a little bit later, is this research and development idea. So there are ways through this. So we'll talk about that when I get to R&D. I mentioned that we're driving towards gas as the predominant solution going forward. That's segment number 3, and that's really important. Gas is another dominant solution for America. At Southern Company 4 years ago, gas was only about 12% of our generating portfolio. Now it's in the very high 20s, and it will be about 40% probably by 2020, would be my guess. And so what is the idea here? Well, there is an issue. Gas is a super long-term attractive solution, but it is not a panacea. There are 3 reasons that we've got to be very careful about how we do this transition that we must do. Please understand, I am a fan of natural gas. But here are the issues. Number 1, some people have raised environmental issues around fracking. That is the notion of injecting into the ground chemicals to fracture the rock formations and the so-called tight gas, shale gas formations, so that it releases the natural gas and we can use it. And in fact, the emergence of the so-called tight gas, shale gas regions of the United States are the reasons why natural gas has fallen from 4 years ago, $14.50 per million BTU, now to 4 or less. And that's been great for our customers, and that's what's really driven the economics of switching from coal to gas. Those are the right drivers, economy, on behalf of customers. I get that. We've got to resolve the question around fracking. Second, because I believe natural gas is so important to our future, we've got to build out the infrastructure necessary to get the gas from where it is being found now to where it needs to be. In the United States, at least in the Southeast, we have touched our major vendors for interstate gas pipelines. They are full from a firm transportation standpoint right now. And if we're going to move to hopefully 40% of our energy being derived from natural gas resources, we need to expand that gas pipeline infrastructure right now. It's going to take 3.5 to 4 years to get that done. And if certain environmental regulations, which require the transition to occur by 2015, stay in place, the numbers don't add up. We've got to resolve that. The third issue is just one related to volatility. Volatility, when you think about value as a function of risk and return, and you think about the low price of natural gas being a proxy for a return, natural gas has historically been more risky, more volatile, certainly, than nuclear and coal. So volatility is not good for American families. It is not good for American businesses. We've got to find a way through to create structures to dampen out that volatility in the gas markets of the future. But please understand, I remain committed to natural gas as a dominant solution for the future. The fourth area I talked about are renewables. Now, renewables are exciting and costs appear to be coming down, and we're committed. Southern Company is committed to that. You know, currently we operate right now the second largest solar facility in New Mexico. We've done that in a joint venture with Ted Turner. We are building the nation's largest biomass facility for the benefit of the nation, for the citizens of Austin, Texas. And we just announced that we're purchasing over 200 megawatts of wind energy for the customers in Alabama Power. And we're experimenting with wind and we're experimenting with solar all over the Southeast. These are great things and we're excited. But please understand, in my opinion, renewables will never displace nuclear, coal, and natural gas as the primary energy providers of the United States, at least in my near term here. They have limitations. Let's just go through those real quickly. And let's use kind of wind and solar as the examples because they represent the lion's share of renewable energy in America today. Generally speaking, where there are good renewable resources, there are no people. That's a negative. And so what we got to do is find a way to get the energy from where the people aren't to where the people are. That's going to require building significant transmission infrastructure. And if we learned anything about the blackouts in the Midwest and in the Northeast, and recently here in the desert Southwest, the greater the distance, the greater the risk. You're much better off building your primary sources of generation near the load centers. That is a physical characteristic of the nation's energy grids. The second issue has to deal with intermittency. That is, what do you do when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine? Well, obviously what you're going to do here is build backup generation near the load centers, primarily with gas. So you're doubling down again on that gas bed. The third issue deals with the nature of financial returns in that industry. That industry is really built on the backs of federal subsidies. What happens if those federal subsidies cease to exist? Think about the nation's financial integrity today. How much longer can we afford to support that industry? And so one of the things we've got to do is find a way to get the cost production curves down, and the efficiency, the conversion of sunlight to electricity or whatever, to be sensible on a standalone basis. We're very bullish on solar, by the way, and we think that solar has some application down the road. So we'll see how that develops. Please understand, I am all in on renewables. I want to do what's best for my customers from a reliability, price, and customer satisfaction standpoint. Renewables are not an end-all. They have limitations that we must recognize, and they will play an important part of our portfolio, but they will be a niche part of the portfolio. The fifth segment that I want to talk about is one generally people don't think about in terms of energy generation, and it is this notion of energy efficiency. See, I think in my industry, energy efficiency gets a bad name. It says use less. That's not what it means at all. In fact, energy efficiency really means use my product more wisely. I've always been involved at Southern in elements of strategy development. One time I had the idea of I'm head of strategy and all that stuff. And I always love to think about, when I think about strategy, concepts of offense and defense. We've got to learn as an industry to play offense in an energy efficiency environment. And the way I translate that is really this notion of if I can prove to you that electrode technologies are a better answer than, say, other more expensive, less clean sources of energy, then you're going to use mine. You're going to be more likely to use more electrode technologies to displace other forms of energy, and therefore I can grow. That's what I want to do. And so we're working hard to do that. There's lots of interesting applications here, but one obvious one is electric vehicles. You know that we consume, I guess, about $1 billion a day on imported foreign oil. And do you know you can fill up your electric vehicle today for $1 a gallon? That's not a bad trade. There's a lot of other concepts that we can bring to bear, but let me assure you, providing solutions to make electrode technologies more efficient in your lives is good for your bottom line and good for the environment. And that's something we've got to make a priority. So that first thing is all the arrows in the quiver: nuclear, 21st century coal, gas, renewables, energy efficiency. Southern Company's committed $20 billion, 250,000 jobs or more. The second segment I talked about really deals with this notion of proprietary research and development. And I really talk about that in 3 segments. The first one is providing a way forward on coal. Southern Company has had a presence in research and development now since the late 60s. And when a lot of other companies withdrew from research and development in order to save costs, we maintained a presence for a variety of reasons. But one of the things that has really borne fruit here, and it goes back to the conversation I had with Secretary Chu. In the 70s, we were worried about oil shortages. And what we were working on in our R&D facilities were things like taking coal and working on liquefaction, where we would turn it into an oil derivative. Well, that work has morphed now into gasification. Southern Company, along with our partner Kellogg Brown Root, has developed a technology where we have the only existing coal gasification technology which has a carbon capture element to it, built from the ground up for electricity production. We're deploying that. This is no pilot. We are deploying that technology in Mississippi, 582 megawatts. We are using native Mississippi lignite. We take the lignite, run it through our technology, we gasify it, we create a synthesis gas. We take 65% of the CO2, strip it out of the synthesis gas, push it into the ground in enhanced oil recovery, and push out more oil. It is a wonderful symbiosis, and I understand that you have Denbury here to talk to you later today. So that is a wonderful application. We take the remaining synthesis gas and we run it into further technology to create electrons. Imagine this, a domestic grown technology unique in the world today that uses a native American resource currently laying unused to create more domestic oil, to create more domestic tax base and jobs and electricity that makes sense for America. These are ways forward. And interestingly, as Secretary Chu was lamenting the fact that the Chinese had outstripped us, we've beaten the Chinese to the punch on this important technology. And in fact, Southern Company is licensing this technology to China today. This is a way forward. $2.5 billion in service date around 2014. The second kind of area of R&D really goes to environmental controls. Look, we all know that truly sustainable energy policy provides, first, reliability supply of electricity, second, a sensible economic consequence, and third, the cleanest energy in the world. Southern Company has done more, built more than any other company in America today. We've developed our own scrubber technologies, developed our own SCR technologies. We've spent to date about $8 billion. And in fact, through our partnerships with others, for example, the scrubber technology was with Chiyoda, we have been able to deploy these $8 billion of capital investments, some 10 to 20% cheaper than our peers in the industry, and our removals of emissions are much greater than normal industry standards. It has been a raging success. And interestingly, we will spend, under current rules, not the proposed rules, another $2 to $4 billion probably by 2013. And here's an interesting statistic for you to consider going forward. Since the 90s, we have increased our generation production by about 40%. We have reduced emissions at the same time, even considering this increase in production, by 70%. And for our flagship units, by the time we add the scrubbers and SCRs and the other things by 2013, we will have reduced emissions at those plants by 90%. We did that without any future regulatory stick. We can find a way forward to succeed in this environment, and we are doing that. The third area of research and development that I think is kind of interesting to talk about is this whole notion of smart technologies. Now, that gets translated typically as smart grid. I think that's too narrow. We call it smart energy, 3 segments: smart power, smart grid, smart choices. Let me just go through those briefly. Smart power. When we think about energy efficiency, very often that gets translated as efficiency as a consumer. How are you going to use stuff more wisely? Well, in fact, our view of this whole smart technology, energy efficiency idea really starts with a fuel source, a gas molecule or coal or nuclear, and how it gets turned, transformed into an electron, moved, and finally sold. And so therefore, when I think about it, smart power deals with the process of taking a fuel source and turning it into an electron. We run the best generating fleet in America. Coal fleet, equivalent forced outage rate. I know that sounds like jargon, but it's how often does your plant not run when you want it to. The industry average is about 6.5%. Southern Company has led the United States, I think, 9 out of the last 10 years on this statistic. We're about 1.7%. We're exceedingly efficient in how we take coal, turn it into an electron, and that carries actually over for the rest of our generating fleet. We're very interested in renewables and how to incorporate this kind of notion of how variable the supply is from renewables into a reliable grid. That's an important issue. And the third issue under smart power is likewise as exciting, and that is this notion of, particularly for solar, the first solar guys particularly are people that articulate this very well, but ex-federal subsidies, if they can get their production cost efficiency to a point, by say mid-decade, and their efficiency of translating sunlight into an electron, then perhaps by 2016 or so, they have a competitive generation source for the rest of America. And maybe one day you'll see distributed generation broadly, led by solar, I believe, where you'll see solar panels on your rooftops and a variety of other things. It makes perfect sense to me. So that's smart power. Smart grid is really the wires. So that's transmission, distribution, culminating in a smart meter. This is nothing new to us. We've spent, I don't know, about $1 billion on smart grid over the last 10 years. So we've been working on this before it became kind of a buzzword. The interesting thing is these smart meters are really fascinating, right? So Southern Company has deployed now well over 3 million smart meters And we'll have deployed over, I guess, right around 4.6 million smart meters by the end of 2012. But let me tell you something. This is fascinating stuff. We have deployed this technology with the idea, and it justifies itself, by removing meter readers from the field and trucks from the road. Good for bottom lines, good for the environment. The smart meter is the gateway to the smart home. Now, I've worked at Southern 30 years, I've had 15 different jobs. One of my jobs was CIO. You all know what CIO stands for. There were many days I thought CIO stood for career is over. Why did I think that? In the technology markets, very often you see this in IT. People's value equation is driven by first to market. And what they do is they hit the market first, and then invariably when it doesn't work or there's something wrong, they send out a patch. As the smart meter technology is the gateway to the so-called smart home, we will not, with our conservative bearing, expose the electric networks of the Southeast to patches. Nor will we expose our customer data, customer information, to cyber attacks, cyber terrorism. We are going to take a very careful, considered posture to opening up that capability. The third area I want to talk about is really smart choices. This is something, honestly, I don't know how it's going to unfold. This is the idea of what value chains will emerge and how Southern should play. I just don't know. But I will say that there are so much uncertainty here, what we've got to do is make lots of little options bets. And so that's what we're doing. We're doing hundreds of little pilots all across the Southeast to see how we might play. So it'll be something that's exciting, and we'll kind of see how that unfolds. We're devoting a lot of research and development to those capabilities as well. So that really is the wrap-up. The first segment deals with all the arrows in the quiver. Nuclear, we must find a way forward. Thank goodness we have vision and some courage in this country to continue the momentum. We must be successful on Vogtle. Second, coal. We must find a way forward. We've got to have a sensible approach to balancing regulation with the economy and our ability to create jobs. Third is natural gas. It's a huge growth area for the economy. It is not a panacea. We have to fight our way through some issues in the near term. Fourth is renewables. Exciting, but let's understand their limitations. Fifth is energy efficiency. Let's find a way to create growth strategies while making the use of our product more efficient. And then the second segment is research and development. We need to double down in research and development. This country should take a backseat to no one in technology development. Think of how we've driven our economy so far. We've got to continue to do that. In closing, before I take questions, I'd love to have any comments or anything you all have. In closing, let me just say that these issues are not really, in my view, deep political issues. This is not a Democrat issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is an American issue. Southern Company is a company that typically speaks softly and lets our credibility and lets our performance speak for us. But the issues out there today require us to take a more robust stance, as I am doing with you this morning. As citizens of the United States, we need for you to understand the importance of these issues and how getting energy policy right will create a more robust economy and a greater foundation to grow jobs in America today. Thanks very much.